The morning air felt colder than usual. Emma stood by the window, the coffee cup in her hand trembling slightly as she stared at the view outside, but her mind was somewhere else. There was a gnawing feeling in her chest that had been growing over the past few weeks. She couldn't explain it. The days had grown long, the conversations at home shorter. The warmth she once shared with Ethan had faded into something distant. Something almost unfamiliar. He still kissed her goodnight, still sat beside her during dinner. But she could feel it, the absence. The laughter they once shared had turned into silence, and she couldn't help but wonder. Was it her fault? Was she the one who drifted away? Or was it Ethan, with his late nights at work, his evasions when she asked about his day? Something had changed between them, and she couldn't place what it was. But now, as she thought about it, she couldn't ignore the sickening feeling that there was someone else. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw the flash of gold fall from Ethan's finger as he reached for the sugar. For a split second, the ring hung in the air, its delicate design catching the light before it landed in her coffee. She stared at it, almost transfixed, as it settled at the bottom of her mug, the gold glinting against the dark liquid. Without thinking, Emma reached for the ring, her fingers brushing the surface of the coffee before she carefully pulled it out. She stared at it in silence, feeling the weight of it in her hand. The ring had always been a symbol of their love, the one he had given her on their wedding day. But now, it felt like a silent witness to everything that was unraveling between them. She didn't say anything as she handed it back to Ethan, but the look on her face was enough. He took it, slipping it back onto his finger without a word. It was as if the moment had never happened, as if everything between them was still fine. Still the way it was supposed to be. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That the moment the ring fell into her coffee, so had their marriage. Over the next few days, the tension between them only grew. Ethan's late nights became more frequent, and when he did come home, he was distant. Preoccupied, Emma would find herself staring at him, trying to understand what had happened. Trying to piece together the fragments of their life before everything started slipping away. And then, there were the messages. At first, it was innocent enough. A text here and there that didn't seem to mean much. But as the days went on, Emma started noticing the patterns, the late-night messages. The way Ethan's face would soften when he read them. The way his smile seemed to linger a little longer when he responded. She hadn't intended to look, but one night, when he left his phone on the counter, she found herself unable to resist. The screen lit up with a message from Claire. "I miss you more than you know," it read. Emma's heart sank. She had never heard of Claire before, but the words were clear. They were intimate, full of longing, and they were not meant for her. The world around her seemed to blur as she stared at the phone. Her chest tightened, the realization hitting her harder than any argument or confrontation ever could. Ethan was having an affair. And as much as she wanted to confront him, to scream, to throw the phone in his face, she didn't. She couldn't. She wasn't even sure who she was angry at anymore. She was angry at him, at Claire, at herself for not seeing it sooner. But mostly, she was angry at the ring, the symbol of everything they had built together. Now sitting in her coffee cup, so casually forgotten. The days after the discovery were a blur. Emma went through the motions, pretending nothing had changed, pretending everything was fine. But the ring in her coffee had shattered something inside her. It wasn't just the affair. It was the slow, creeping realization that their love had always been fragile. Always on the edge of something broken. Ethan's affair wasn't the start of it, It was the result of years of neglect, of unspoken frustrations, of the quiet erosion of something that had once seemed perfect. It wasn't until a week later that Ethan came home early, his face drawn with guilt. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway, looking at her as if waiting for her to say something. Emma didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She knew what had happened, and she wasn't sure she could forgive it. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far." Emma looked up at him then, her eyes cold, her heart heavy. "You never meant to, but you did." He opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't," she whispered. "I don't need your apologies. I need you to be honest with me." He stood there, silent, as if he had no answer. And in that silence, Emma realized something she had been afraid to admit to herself. She didn't need him anymore. She didn't need his empty apologies or his hollow promises. She needed to move on. And the first step in that was finally letting go of the ring, the symbol of a love that had never been what she thought it was. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Emma stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The ring sat on the counter, forgotten once again. But this time, it wasn't a symbol of their love. It was a reminder of everything they had lost, of the lies they had told each other, and of the woman she was finally beginning to become, the woman who no longer needed the past to define her. She picked up the ring, stared at it for a moment, and then, without a second thought, dropped it into the trash. There was no ceremony, no final confrontation. Just a quiet, unspoken goodbye. And with that, Emma let go. She didn't know what the future held. But she knew one thing for sure: she would never again let a ring, or anything else, define her happiness. Ethan's absence became more pronounced in the house. It wasn't just the long hours at work or the late-night texts that lingered between them, it was the way everything felt strained. Emma could feel the weight of it every time she walked into a room. Every time she sat at the table, trying to carry on with what had once been normal. But it wasn't normal anymore. The ring still sat in the drawer where she had placed it. An unwanted reminder of their wedding vows. Of promises broken long before the affair was discovered. She hadn't told him she knew about Claire. Hadn't confronted him about the messages or the feelings he'd clearly been hiding for months. She didn't need to. It was all there, in plain sight. One evening, after another cold and distant dinner, Emma sat alone in the living room, her eyes on the empty space where Ethan had once sat. He'd left early that morning for a business trip and wouldn't be back until the following evening. She didn't know why she expected things to feel different. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the absence of his presence in the house. But it felt oddly peaceful. And then, she heard the door. It creaked open, and there he was, standing in the doorway. A tired look on his face, suitcase in hand. "I need to talk to you," he said. His voice was rough, his eyes pleading. Emma looked up, her expression neutral. What is there left to say? Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft thud. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry for what I've done." His apology was familiar now. She'd heard it before, after the first lie, the first betrayal. After every small thing he'd ever done to hurt her. She was tired of it. Tired of the words that held no weight. "I know," she replied softly. "I know, Ethan. But sorry doesn't change anything anymore." The weight of her words hit him harder than he had expected. He walked toward her, desperate for something, an explanation, a glimmer of hope. But Emma didn't move. She stayed still, watching him with steady eyes. I was lost, Em. I didn't know what I was doing. Claire, she made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible, he admitted, his voice breaking. Emma stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving him. And now? Do you feel better now, Ethan? Do you feel like you matter? Because I'm still standing here. But I don't think I matter to you anymore. Not the way you used to. His face crumpled at her words, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't angry, not anymore. She was tired, and tired of waiting for him to come to the realization that had been staring him in the face for months. I can't keep doing this, Ethan. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I've been living in a lie, and I let myself believe it because I thought that's what love was. But love doesn't feel like this. Love doesn't feel like being invisible in your own home, in your own marriage, she said. Her voice steady, though the pain underneath it was clear. She stepped toward him, the space between them finally closing. Love doesn't feel like watching your wedding ring fall into my coffee. And then realizing it doesn't mean anything to you anymore. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Ethan was too stunned by the finality of her words, by the way she spoke. Like she had already accepted what needed to happen. I can't fix this, Ethan said, almost as a question. Emma nodded, her gaze soft but resolute. No, you can't, and I don't want you to. The next morning, Ethan left. He didn't apologize this time, there was nothing left to say. As he walked out the door, Emma didn't watch him go. She didn't even look at the ring sitting on the counter anymore. It was just another thing, just another piece of the past that had no place in her future. As the door clicked shut behind him, Emma stood still in the silence that followed. The house felt different now. The air was lighter. And though she didn't know what the next step would be, she finally felt like she was free. It had taken a long time for her to realize that letting go wasn't just about removing him from her life, it was about reclaiming the space that had once been filled with doubt, with fear, and with the weight of unspoken truths. And in that space, Emma found herself again. The days after Ethan left were eerily calm. The house, which had once felt so full of noise and tension, now seemed empty in a way that was both unsettling and strangely peaceful. Emma had spent years pretending everything was fine, hiding behind the veil of what they once were. But now, with Ethan gone, there was no need for pretenses anymore. The truth was finally out in the open, and though it had taken too long, Emma could finally breathe without the weight of their broken marriage suffocating her. Her routine remained the same, but the energy in the house was different. She could hear the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint whir of the washing machine. But there were no more late-night silences, no more empty conversations. Just peace. She took long walks around the neighborhood in the evenings, her mind wandering through everything that had happened, through the lies and the betrayals, through the quiet acceptance of a love that had withered. It was in these walks that she found herself again. She realized she had spent so long trying to hold on to a version of Ethan, a version of their life that no longer existed. She had been afraid to let go, afraid to face the truth of her own loneliness, her own unmet needs. But now, she saw the world differently. The first time she sat alone at the dinner table, it felt strange, like a ritual she had forgotten how to perform. The empty chair across from her seemed to taunt her, reminding her of the years of silence between them, of the moments that should have been shared but never were. She had spent so much time waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence, to give her the love that she had once thought was unconditional. But now, the silence felt like a space she had created, a space where she could heal. Where she could finally listen to herself. She no longer spent her nights waiting for texts, waiting for him to explain himself. Or to beg for her forgiveness. The empty phone on the counter was no longer a reminder of the lies or the affair. It was just a phone, nothing more, nothing less. She no longer needed it to feel connected to anyone. She was learning how to be her own source of strength again. One evening, as Emma sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of red and orange, she realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. Not at Ethan, not at herself. Anger had once consumed her, keeping her awake at night, making her relive every moment. Every mistake. But now, it had slipped away, leaving behind a sense of clarity. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would ever be ready to love again, or if she even wanted to. But she knew one thing for certain: she was done with the past. Done with the version of love that had broken her. Done with the person she had become for the sake of someone else. She was done pretending, and for the first time in years, she felt free. The next morning, she woke up early, the light from the sun spilling through the blinds. It was the first time in a long while that she didn't feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She went into the kitchen, and as she reached for the coffee mug, her eyes fell on the ring. It was still there. The one Ethan had dropped in her coffee weeks ago. She had never moved it, never thrown it away, but now, it didn't seem important anymore. With a deep breath, Emma picked it up and held it in her hand. It was heavy, cold, and it didn't mean what it once had. She looked at it for a long moment, and then, without hesitation, she tossed it in the trash. It was a simple act, but it felt like a declaration, one that marked the end of something and the beginning of something else. As she walked away from the trash can, she realized that the ring no longer had any hold over her. It was just a symbol of a past that no longer defined her. The future was hers to create, and for the first time in a long time, she was ready to step into it, on her own terms. The silence in the house no longer felt suffocating. It felt like freedom. The next few weeks passed with an ease Emma had never expected. She no longer felt the weight of the past on her shoulders. And each day felt like a new beginning. The house, though still quiet, had become hers again. She arranged the furniture in the living room the way she had always wanted. Moved a few things around, and for the first time in a long while, the space felt warm and alive. She found herself rediscovering the things she once loved: reading, painting, taking walks in the park, and realized she had forgotten how much she had given up in the pursuit of a love that was never really hers. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the soft clink of her spoon against the mug brought her back to the present. She hadn't noticed how often she had sat alone in this very spot, waiting for Ethan to come home. But now, there was no waiting, no yearning. She could feel a sense of calm in her heart, something she had longed for, but had never allowed herself to feel. She had let go of the need for closure, for an explanation, and had begun to accept the fact that not every chapter in life had to have a neat ending. She couldn't change what had happened, but she could control how she moved forward. The pain she had carried for so long had faded, not all at once but in small, quiet moments like these. Her friends began to notice the change in her. They had called her the day after Ethan left, offering sympathy, asking if she needed anything. But Emma had surprised them all with her calmness, her assurance that she was going to be fine. And as she spent more time with them, she found herself laughing again, reconnecting with the person she had been before all the turmoil. One afternoon, as she met up with a close friend for coffee, she found herself talking openly about everything that had happened, the affair, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and yet, there was no anger in her voice, no bitterness. Just a quiet acceptance. "It's funny," Emma said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I thought I would never get past this. I thought the pain would swallow me whole. But I think I've finally realized that I don't need him. Not anymore. I don't need anyone to complete me. I'm enough, just as I am." Her friend smiled softly, a knowing look in her eyes. "It sounds like you've really found peace." Emma nodded. "I think I have." As she walked home that afternoon, the sun setting on the horizon, Emma realized that the freedom she had sought for so long wasn't something she had to find in someone else. It was something she had to give to herself. She had spent so many years waiting, hoping for someone else to make her happy, to fill the empty spaces inside her. But the truth was, she had always been whole. She just hadn't seen it until now. When she returned home, she found herself standing in front of the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in years, she really looked at herself, not with judgment or regret, but with acceptance. She smiled at the woman staring back at her, a woman who had survived, who had learned, who was ready to start anew. The next morning, Emma woke up early, the first light of dawn creeping through the curtains. She stretched, feeling the stretch of her muscles, the strength in her body. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly alive, truly free. She walked into the kitchen, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. The world outside seemed full of possibilities now, full of a future that was hers to shape. She had let go of the past, and in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. As she looked out at the city below, Emma smiled to herself. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. Emma woke to a new day, the sun filtering through the blinds in soft rays. There was a strange comfort in this stillness, in this freedom she had slowly, almost unknowingly, embraced. It had been a month since Ethan left, and she had spent that time not dwelling on the past, but finding herself again. Every step she had taken since that day had led her further away from the life she once knew, and toward a version of herself she had long buried. The house, empty now of all the tension that once filled it, felt like her sanctuary. She had stopped waiting for Ethan's calls, stopped worrying about what might happen between them. She had made her peace. There were no more unanswered questions. No more wondering if things could go back to what they once were. The truth was clear now, nothing would ever be the same. She had taken to spending her mornings in quiet solitude, sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee, staring out at the street below. Her routine was simple, but it gave her the space to think and reflect. No longer was she drowning in the noise of an unspoken truth. It was just her now, and that felt more like home than anything she had known before. One afternoon, as Emma was out running errands, she ran into someone she hadn't seen in years, Rachel, her college roommate. Rachel had been a constant presence in her life during those carefree years, always there to laugh, to listen, and to support her. They hugged, and Emma could feel the warmth of their friendship wrap around her like a comfort she didn't realize she had been missing. "You look different," Rachel said, pulling back to take a good look at her. Emma smiled softly. "I've changed." Rachel raised an eyebrow, her smile curious but kind. "Changed how?" Emma hesitated for a moment, the weight of everything she had been through still present in the back of her mind. But she didn't feel the need to explain it all. Instead, she simply said, I've learned to let go. Of everything. Of him. Of the past. Rachel's eyes softened. I'm glad to hear that. It was then that Emma realized how much she had needed this, how much she had needed to reconnect with someone who remembered her before the weight of her marriage had defined her. It felt like an unspoken validation of her journey, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, Emma began to embrace her new life fully. She started taking weekend trips to places she'd always wanted to see but had never gotten the chance. She reconnected with old friends, spent afternoons reading in the park, and even took up a new hobby, painting. The canvas became her outlet, her way of expressing the emotions she hadn't known how to put into words. Every stroke of color felt like a release, like a weight being lifted from her shoulders. One evening, as she stood before a new painting, one of her best yet, she realized something. She had finally let go. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, breaking her reverie. It was a message from Ethan. She hadn't heard from him in weeks, and for a moment, she hesitated. It wasn't that she was angry anymore, she had moved past that, but part of her wondered if this was a message she still needed to answer. But she didn't reach for the phone. Instead, she picked up her paintbrush and began another stroke of color. The soft hum of the music filling the air. Ethan was in the past, where he belonged. She was here now, in the present, creating a life that was hers to shape. The message would remain unread. It didn't matter anymore. For the first time in years, Emma felt completely at peace. She was whole, and that was enough.